Fred Harris, the former Democratic senator from Oklahoma, died last week at the age of 94, and in his honor, I am doing a book recommendation. This time, the Kerner Report, aka the official report of the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders. Let me put it on the screen. The report was released in 1968. You can see it here. And I do have an affiliate page on Bookshop where you can buy the book from one of my bookshelves and I get a commission. But the entire thing is available for free on PDFs because it's a historical federal government report. And you can also check it out from local libraries. So truly, whichever is your pleasure. Let me give you some spoilers to hook you in. The Kerner Report was released in February of 1968. It's a government document, a government report. It sells 2 million copies. Marlon Brando will go on network news as part of the reporting, and he'll read passages of it out loud. Um, it's a document that speaks to race relations in the United States in a way that is both so hopeful and so damning that many Americans are fascinated by what it found, but also terribly frightened of it. So, where did it come from? In August of 1965, right in the first week of the summer, or first week of August, Lyndon Baines Johnson, then president, signs into law the Voting Rights Act. The previous summer, he had signed into law the Civil Rights Act, and with these two pieces of legislation, he effectively ends the Jim Crow era of American history. But rather than being greeted with racial harmony, within a week of signing the Voting Rights Act, there's a traffic stop in the Watts section of Los Angeles that escalates into a riot that plunges the entire Watts neighborhood for days into violence, looting, fires, vandalism, and it takes the National Guard to break it up. It turns out it wasn't an isolated event. For the next summer of 1966 and the summer after that of 1967, city after city in the United States sees some form of riot in which black neighborhoods rise up in violence. There's typically some type of initiating or incendiary event that starts it off, and for days the city is met with looting, it's met with fires, it's met with a lot of death. Some of the death comes on the side of the police, some of the death comes from police trying to quell the riot, and often the National Guard or some type of military unit has to actually quell the disturbance. This culminates at the tail end of the summer of 1967 with a riot in Newark that was so large, people thought it rivals the draft riots of New York City. But within days of it ending, another riot broke out in Detroit, even larger than Newark. And it was shocking for Americans. It just, what is happening in these cities? Why are they falling again and again into riots and violence? Some people call them uprisings, some people call them violence, but the point is the same. People die, neighborhoods are burnt to the ground, and it takes the National Guard to come in. Before the Guard has even left Detroit, while the fires are still burning, LBJ has a presidential address from his office to say that he's creating a commission to investigate the source of these riots and figure out what has happened. He appoints this commission Fred Harris, the sitting Democratic senator from Oklahoma. The chair is Otto Kerner, the former governor of Illinois, and the co-chair is John Lindsay, the then mayor of New York. And their task is to go out and find why this happened and what will stop it from happening again. Now, Johnson's appointed Harris and a bunch of other loyalists to this commission with the mandate, basically, make sure you make me look good. I mean, he thought, and there was actually a previous commission after the Watts riot in 65 called the McCone Commission, that this was like career criminals taking advantage of an opportunity, that this was riffraff, in his words, or communists, that it was a plot, that black people were actually really happy because they just got the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and there wasn't any undue problems that was making them riot. It was criminals taking advantage of the situation. And he made it pretty clear to the commission that is what he expected them to find. Well, they take their task very seriously, and Lindsay in particular is promoting just how much mayors are struggling with what is going on in their neighborhoods, in the ghettos that they've essentially inherited from years and decades of Jim Crow, or as they called it in the North, James Crow segregation. And, they look through kind of a synthesis of the research literature. They go through news articles to see if they were actually riots or if people were making a big deal out of something to sell newspapers and calling something a riot when it wasn't. And then they go and they interview a bunch of mayors, they interview a bunch of citizens. And over the course of the first few months of the commission's work, they become radicalized by what they find. The situation of Black Americans in urban ghettos is beyond anything that they could have imagined. The housing quality, the environmental quality, the type of jobs people can get, the neighborhoods, they don't have good schools, they don't have playgrounds of any kind, they don't even have any grass. And this commission essentially works in secret from LBJ to come up with what they think is the truth that America needs to hear. And rather than toe the party line of like, yep, it's just some criminal kids, like they're going to come down hard and say the reason why America is seeing every summer outburst of violence in black neighborhoods is because of white racism. And they say that in the plainest terms, that white racism against black people that prevent them from having good jobs or houses or decent economic lives is a key cause of these riots. LBJ is so mad. He's supposed to host an event at the White House where he brings the commission in to thank them and to talk about the report. He cancels it. I mean, he can't believe that they said this because his agenda, his political base is fracturing underneath him. By this point, it's 1968. He's decided he's not going to run again. This is an open presidential race. He's trying to keep his liberal base together. The situation in Vietnam is getting worse. And then this report comes out and says, by the way, never mind these two landmark pieces of legislation or all your great society. Black people have it terribly in America, and the riots are an outgrowth of this. Because it was so clear from this report that America, it wanted the quick fix to a really long problem. They wanted to sign the Civil Rights Act and sign the Voting Rights Act and then be like, oh, aren't they happy now? But they weren't equal citizens because they hadn't been equal citizens for so long. And the Kerner Report was just unsparing and unforgiving of the problems that Black Americans face and how much of it came because they were Black, because they were denied opportunities. I just, you read this and it is so hard to believe that they wrote this in 1968. So what happened? Was the report listened to? I think they got the report out 4 months early because they wanted to prevent, like, they wanted to get out before the summer of 68. Like, riots happen this summer, we need to get out early. Unfortunately, as they released the report, there was a growing sanitation strike in Memphis. I mean, the exact type of thing that they had talked about. Sanitation workers in Memphis, they were all Black, they were very low paid, and two of them had died in an incredibly preventable workplace injury simply because the city didn't care about them because they were Black men. I mean, when they went on strike, their protest sign read, I am a man. It was just a fundamental question of how Black people will be treated in America. MLK went to Memphis to support the rioters, and he was shot at the Lorraine Motel going out to dinner one night. And you know, a dozen cities in America broke out in riots within 2 hours of hearing the news. The Kerner Commission was ultimately unsuccessful, and that riots still broke out within 2 months of being released, and that any would-be candidate that would have embraced everything that the report recommended, they didn't win. Nixon won, and he came to office on a racist adjacent kind of agenda built on law and order. So I recommend people read this book. One, because it is still insightful about race relations in the US today. Two, it has accounts of 6 of the riots in incredible detail as they unfolded, which are, I mean, it's wild to read. And then you kind of read them and you're like, Jesus, Netflix, do your job. Like, where is the movie? Hollywood, you need to be better. But I also think that it should be required reading. And maybe because it's removed from our contemporary time, it's easier to read about racism in 1968 and think about what it means today than it is to think about racism today. But it's very hard not to read and have it form your opinion of the consequences of having economic policy that doesn't embrace everyone in a country.